And through being able to be still, you then start to notice the little things around you, which to me was the biggest part of getting better, of finding joy in such small things that no one else could provide for me, but it was just in my existence of being that gave me a sense of hope. And that's what then fueled me to survive.
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host, my name is Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the universe. Today on the show, we have Hannah Garland, the trauma-informed self-love coach. Welcome to the show, Hannah. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am super happy to have you, and thank you for agreeing to come on. And I love your smile and your beautiful shirt. You look so nice and radiant. So I'm so happy to jump straight in and ask you the first question. And the first question, what I usually ask, and I'm super curious about it every single time, is your story. How did you become a coach? What has inspired you to be on this journey? Because everyone has such a unique story behind why they are doing what they are doing right now. So I would love you to share the story of yours.
Sure. I mean, my story, I guess, started 20 years ago. I was a professional nanny. And so I worked very closely with mothers and newborns and toddlers. And then about 12 years ago, I suffered a huge trauma. I survived a violent sexual attack. And my world imploded. Everything that I'd known, that I had worked towards, and all my knowledge seemed to literally just have evaded from my brain. And so I went into intense recovery through psychotherapy. And through doing this, I think I had to learn who I was again within my own body. I had to discover the things that I liked, the things that I didn't like. I felt like I'd been born again into a grown-up body and understood nothing. And so it was a really intensive journey. And then through that, I started, as I got better and stronger, I started to look into different practices, things that could help me to feel stronger in myself and to realign with my gut feeling, because I think I felt like my gut feeling had gone, that I didn't have one anymore. So I started doing meditation practices. I started to read a lot more. Everything had so much time outside and became one with nature in a way. Like I'd walk barefooted outside. I'd listen to the birds, which I suppose before trauma I would have taken for granted. I don't think I even noticed the noise that the birds made or the trees swaying in the wind kind of thing. And through that, I then started realizing that through my nannying that I had actually coached many women already. And it was something that I did naturally. It was something that I love doing. I love helping people. I love supporting people on their journey. And then fast forward 10 years, I then thought, right, I want to do coaching properly, but I want to be informed. Like I have so much knowledge about my own trauma, which mirrors so many people's recovery. Every person's story is individual to them, but there's so many triggers and traumas that can be quite similar on their journey. And so I wanted to be better informed and well equipped to help people, because I think I was brave to tell my story and be quite open with that. And once I started to open up to other people, they then opened up to me. And I realized that actually that it's so many people have suffered, but just didn't know how to speak about it. I think through my recovery, I became a better coach, a better version of the coaching that I had done pre-trauma, and then encompassed and I suppose used my trauma as the basis of becoming that coach, becoming the person that I could see that in others, I could hear that in others, which then gave me a skill to be able to talk to them about it.
That's amazing. And I'm super curious to know, because you said like literally everything was wiped out of your brain. Like what has happened there? Do you know any maybe scientific background? Like what happens in such an intense experience that you say that everything was like wiped out and you had to like learn everything from scratch?
Sure. I think it's a kind of a trauma response where we talk about fight or flight and things like that. And I think so there's so many misconceptions. So when somebody has suffered a huge trauma, it's not immediate that you realize what's happened to you. It took me 2 weeks before I was able to start to process. I went into a deep sense of shock, a deep state of shock, which I guess was, now I look at it and I'm proud of my body for actually protecting me. Like obviously it was so big of what I was going through, my body shut down completely. So no feelings were available to me at all. And that continued for quite some time. But I think it's sort of, I was in a different country and away from my family as well, which kind of, I think my fight or flight response drew me to just get home, and then you can start to unravel. And I got home and I still didn't start to unravel for quite some time. And I think everybody around me was horrified by what happened to me. And I was, but it wasn't a feeling that was within reach. I was very numb. And so when I sort of say like it was getting to know who I was again, I wonder if how much I knew of myself before the trauma actually happened. I think, I was very carefree, loved partying, loved my lifestyle and things like that, and maybe took a lot of things for granted. But I don't think the deep spiritual side of me had really awakened fully. And so through my trauma journey, and that's definitely something that came to the forefront of my mind. But through doing that, there were sort of things where I would have my therapist say, like, what do you do to comfort yourself? And I had no clue. I had no idea how to help myself or comfort myself. And I think it is the trauma response that happens in order to survive something like that. It kind of your body has to shut down, and your body, it's been scientifically proven, your body will only allow you to remember and allow you to feel things that it's strong enough to feel. And so it's a protection. It's the short answer, is a protection for helping you to survive.
Yeah, and I can relate to that after the last experience of a breakup that I've had, because like when my partner, expressed that we probably like should break up, I literally like maybe for like a split second I got sad or whatever, but then I got such shock emotion that I was completely numb. I was just sitting there with like poker face, and I was just like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I was so shocked. And as you say, it took me a while to actually unravel, and like months actually to go to the depth of the feeling, to release it all. Maybe like it took me 3 or 3.5 months to actually fully let it all out of my body. But this shock, this initial shock, I was just like, I don't know, I just suppressed it all. It was my body's natural response. And of course, I cared about him so much, and I cared about this relationship so much, but I couldn't process it. I just was not able to. So I feel like with any
Absolutely.
extreme emotions, if we are in shock, it kind of like just stops us. And then, okay, our nervous system is able to go deeper and then deeper and then deeper. And so it's a very natural process of our body, and we need to allow it to take time as much as we need to actually unravel all these layers and peel off these onion layers of emotions that are coming up for us. And so, what do you feel like, based on your
Absolutely.
experience, what are the most important factors in trauma recovery?
Well, for trauma recovery, I think it's kind of society driven, doesn't allow us to be still. I mean, we're encouraged to be busy all the time, whether it's on our phones or working or taking my kids to clubs. There's not really many things that promote just to be still. And I think part of my trauma recovery was my body literally just stopped. I had no choice other than to be still. And to give myself full permission to be like that, that it's okay. It's, if I have days that are non-productive, that's okay. If I kept pushing myself and I was already running on empty, I wasn't going to produce anything. I wasn't going to be successful in just living for a day, let alone continuing on my journey. And so I think it's very much being kind to yourself. And I think that's where, for me, the last part of my journey, which might sound crazy, but the self-love part for me was a really late stage of my journey. It's sort of, I did a lot of surviving and things like that. And so for a trauma thing, it's understanding, it's surrounding it, being able to make choices for yourself, that if something doesn't feel good, you don't have to do it. And I think, and again, it's society driven, that people want you to continue. There's so many people that when you see somebody go through something bad, they say, oh, well, it's okay, or it could be worse. And it's actually, what you need is someone to say, what do you need right now? Do you need to just be? And I think that's probably the most important factor. And through being able to be still, you then start to notice the little things around you, which to me was the biggest part of getting better, of finding joy in such small things that no one else could provide for me, but it was just in my existence of being that gave me a sense of hope. And that's what then fueled me to survive.
That's amazing. And it's so crazy how all these like negative experiences, quote unquote, give us such a depth of life, in terms of like we can really appreciate things. When we have experienced the lowest lows, we are also able to appreciate the highest heights, right? Like we can really, really have
Absolutely.
the span of emotions that we can experience after we have gone through such a big trauma. Although, it doesn't feel good when you're there, it feels uncomfortable and so on. To so many people, this trauma is actually a way to awaken to who they truly are, way to awaken to their essence, to the appreciation and love that is around them. And of course, it's like, we don't wish anyone to experience it, but I believe that there is a reason why we experience these things. There is a reason why our soul has brought us to, or higher power, or whatever you believe in, the universe has brought us to experience specific things, to actually learn lessons, to learn appreciation, to be
Absolutely.
thankful for every single little thing in our life. And so that's so amazing that you have experienced this, and you can really feel now greater appreciation for everything. I remember this feeling that I had after fasting, after I did like a 3 weeks fast, and after only 2 weeks I went out of home, because it's a very internal process. You need to meditate a lot, you don't work at the time, you just really go internal in your spiritual journey, right? And when I went out after 2 weeks at home, I'm like, oh my god, trees, oh my god. Or when you take the first sip of water after dry fast, it's like, this water is like the best thing that has ever happened to you in your entire life. And it's just like, it's sometimes good to, let's say, deprive yourself of something, so that then you can really, really appreciate it. And even more than if you had it all the time, like with fasting, for example, right? If you didn't eat for the whole day, how amazing is this first sip of smoothie that you take, the next day or whatever? It's just really, really.
It's to fully feel, isn't it? It's to be present. And I think that's the thing of sort of going through trauma numbs you. It switches all of those receptors off within your brain that engage us to feel, and just puts us into survival mode. And it is very much that of sort of a journey to recovery. For me especially, I decided that I wanted psychotherapy. I decided that I wanted to speak to somebody, but I decided that I didn't want any medicine whatsoever. I didn't want any medical intervention. I have a homeopath, and that's, me and my family use. But I wanted to feel fully the trauma that I was in, because I think even in my midst of it, I knew that if I didn't, 10 years down the line, it was going to hit me out of the blue. And I wanted life to continue. I survived, I lived. So I deserved to feel all of those things in that moment. And through doing that, I felt some really brutal, raw, horrible emotions, had horrible thoughts about myself and, my gut feel and things like that. But then also got to fully feel joy and experience this beauty around me that was on such a deep level that it filled my heart. Like, I feel so full every single day because I experienced that.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really, really nice to know that you can experience this after such like horrible events that have happened to you. So yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know that you are an expert on domestic abuse, and I would love to touch upon that as well, because I think it's so important to talk about it, because a lot of people are actually in the abuse situation, but they don't talk about it. They don't let their friends know or their family know what's going on, because of course they are sometimes ashamed of things happening at home and behind the closed doors, and people don't talk about it. And I wanted to ask you about the signs of abuse that we, as friends or family members, we can look for, just to know that, like, to be alarmed if something is going on around us. Because as I say, like, it's hidden of the times. I think most of the times it's actually hidden, because people are like, okay, I'm not going to tell anyone that my husband is beating me up, like what they are going to think about me or whatever, right? But these people are actually too, like, I don't know, maybe they feel not deserving for better life, or maybe they have some patterns in their subconscious of powerlessness or victimhood that keep them in the situation. But unless, sometimes if someone doesn't intervene, then they're not going to change anything about it, because of these undeservability or maybe shame or whatever else. So what are the signs to look for when someone is abused?
Sure. I think it's really important to sort of highlight that actually anybody can be abused and anybody can be an abuser. A domestic abuse does not discriminate at all. It happens across cultures, races, women, men, same-sex couples, and children as well. And so I think that a lot of the time when people are experiencing domestic abuse, they're not fully aware that they're actually being abused. They might not be fully aware that they're actually unhappy in that situation either. On average, it takes somebody 9 times of seeking out help before they're brave enough to actually leave that situation. And that's if they are safe enough to leave that situation. Somebody, when they do leave a domestic violence relationship, it's when they leave that they're most likely to be at risk from being killed. And so it's a really dangerous situation. And I think probably they live with that. And so that probably keeps them in the situation if they are aware of the abuse as well.
Wow, 9 times?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's 9 times? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's huge. It's really huge. And I think it's there's what we call a cycle of abuse. And so in a situation, tensions build, and so there can be friction within a household, and there can be children present, there cannot be children present. It really doesn't, it's not specific to who's in it. It's just with the abuser and the person experiencing the abuse. There can be tension building in a situation, and tension builds, and then there ends up being sort of a big incident, whether that's an argument, things get broken, somebody gets hurt, but there tends to be this build up, and then this big incident happens, and then on the back of this incident, there's a reconciliation period where the person may sort of say, well, you made me do this, or it's because I had a bad day, or I'm struggling with this, and be full of excuses for that. And then they go into like a numbing period, which is referred to as the honeymoon period, which I don't necessarily like, but I get why it's called that. And it's where the abuser will promise to seek help. They will promise to correct the error of their ways. And through this cycle of abuse, each time the person that's being abused is weakened. They are essentially mentally tormented, as well as physical or anything else that is happening to them. And each time this cycle repeats itself, they become weaker. So as they become more aware of the abuse coming on, they become weaker and weaker, which is harder for them to then seek help or to break free of that cycle. So I think I have a rule in my household that nothing is taboo. I have 2 children that are 9 and 5 years old, and I really encourage healthy conversations. I really encourage that it's okay to talk about stuff, even if it feels uncomfortable, it's okay to talk about those things. And I do feel that in coaching, I think when you look at the statistics, there's a charity of 1 in 4 of people that have been abused, but that's just by reported crimes. The true statistics, when you look across the charities, is 1 in 2. So if you're in a room with one other person, one of you have experienced domestic abuse on a level. And with it being that prevalent, I think healthy conversations is probably the biggest element for me of being able to combat domestic abuse. And instead of let's looking at the cure of how to help people get through that, let's work at the preventative from a really young age. But I think of when I see people, and I've helped people who have been experiencing domestic abuse or have experienced domestic abuse in the past, I think the thing is that they don't recognise that they're being abused. But then there's things that we could look out for as, are they withdrawn? Are they as confident as what they once were? I've had friends that were really bubbly and outgoing and loved, life in every way. And then they got into a relationship, and it's quite normal, isn't it? When you get into a relationship, you want to spend more time with that person. You do recluse a little bit, but then do they become withdrawn? Are there reasons why they can't go out? Are they constantly checking in with their partner and asking for permission to do things? Those sorts of things would be red flags to me. I think with physical abuse, I think that society, again, has kind of driven that that's what domestic abuse looks like. If somebody turns up with a black eye and constantly says they've fallen down the stairs, but actually abuse is quite sneaky when it happens. If somebody is being physically abused, the abuser tends to hurt them in areas that are going to be covered by clothing anyway. It's the coercion for me that I find really difficult, because it's a mental game. And for when somebody's in a coercive, controlled relationship, it's quite difficult, because sometimes out of respect, you might ask your partner if it's okay for you to go out, being respectful to that, to your significant other. But I also think that there are other signs, like I say, of being withdrawn, of maybe regaining control in other aspects of their life. And so somebody who maybe wasn't as controlled may become quite controlling over certain things. They might jump at loud noises. They might be triggered by a door slamming or an alarm going off or something like that. And I think as society, if we could be more aware of those things and actually be more in touch with that, if we saw somebody having a reaction to something, instead of saying, oh, it's just Sheila, she's jumpy, or, and things like that, we could actually be a bit more in tune and be like, are you okay? The likelihood is if somebody's being abused and you ask them if they're okay, they'll probably say that they're absolutely fine. But if you continue to have conversations with them and continue to ask if they're okay, or check in with them, you look tired today, are you okay? And if you continue to do that and you build up, then they actually know that they've got a trusted person. So when they are brave enough and feel strong enough that they do want to seek help, they have options. Because I think one of the greatest things within abuse is that they become quite isolated. An individual will be cut off from mostly their family, their friends, from all of their close friends especially as well, because they might have an opinion. So the abuser tends to isolate them more. And so if there are options, don't give up on your friends, don't give up on your family. If you think that something's going on, don't swipe it away and say that it's their issue. Still be there and hold a space for them. Just know that they have to do it in their time, maybe not at the pace that you want them to.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I've had friends who were kind of abused and also like secluded and couldn't really talk to anyone, and didn't even talk to me for months. And I kind of knew what's going on, so I of course like reached out and was like, let's connect whenever you're ready, whenever you are out of it. So I can totally relate. But actually, two things came to my mind, and one of them is like the domestic abuse definition, because I feel like when we think of domestic abuse, we mean physical abuse, but actually domestic abuse is very much emotional, oftentimes more so
Mm.
than physical. And so I feel like maybe people can misinterpret it, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not beaten up in my home, so I'm not abused domestically, right? But you actually are if you're deprived emotionally of your needs, or if you, for example, are manipulated, or if you're triangulated against, or if there is intermittent reinforcement, as this manipulation tactics, when the partner is like so nice to you and then so shit to you and then so nice to you again, so that makes you feel addicted to these heights when the partner or whatever, whoever family member is going to be so nice to you and give you this love and approval. So like there are also emotional signs of it, right? Not only physical. So I just wanted to mention it, because I feel like for many people it's not clear that domestic abuse is emotional too, and sometimes even more than physical.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I feel like one of the things that I would say that look for the signs of domestic abuse is actually like, if you can be attuned to people, if you can like have a skill of emotional attunement in terms of like really feeling into how someone feels, it will be way easier for you to actually discover what is going on really. Because if you ask someone like, is everything okay, and they say no, but you can actually feel that there is something there, because you're so attuned to the other person that you are feeling what they are feeling, and you can feel this resistance. It's like, oh, it's not truth, right? It's not the truth being said, it's something
Yeah.
hidden behind it. So if you can be attuned to your friends and to your family and really practice the attunement, because it's also not that easy for people who are more so, let's say, intellectual or more so action takers than emotional. It might be not that easy to just be emotionally attuned to someone, because you have to be willing to feel shit sometimes. You have to be willing to feel how this other person
Yeah.
feels, right? So you need to open up fully to experiencing all the emotions that they are feeling. So it might not be as comfortable as we might want often to actually like open ourselves up fully to the other person, to be so attuned that we literally feel how this person feels. But if we can practice that, and if we really, I feel like if we really care about people, that are close to us, we need to be attuned to them, because we need to know their needs, their desires, their emotions, and we need to practice it, and to build even intimacy or great relationship, or authenticity in relationships, trust, and all these
Yeah.
things. So
Build
if
trust. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the word that comes to me, is trust. And it's, like I say, you can ask people if they're okay, but they're not necessarily going to offer that information. But if you say, hey, I'm going for a coffee, come with me. Or if in a work environment, I'm just going to the canteen, or, there's plenty of environments that we can be in where we can make space that's not putting a person on the spot to offer up. Because when somebody's experiencing abuse, they might feel quite protective of it. And a lot of the time, that's to them a version of love. And to be on their own is a really frightening thought. And they might think that that's all they're worthy of because they've been so broken down. And so it's only when you start to have other healthy connections around you, and it's in a workplace is perfect, because the abuser cannot actually they do sometimes, but on the whole, at the beginning, when they start building trust with somebody within a workplace, that's something that the abuser can't actually intervene with. As the cycle of abuse does become more severe, they will a lot of the time express jealousy over their partner working, and say, but you spend more time there than with me. And that's another way of isolating somebody from their daily life as well, because then it helps them to regain greater control over them. But I do think that when you have, if you do have access to people around you, like you say, to be in tune and just to hold space, I think as humans in society, we give up quite easily sometimes on other people, which is so the wrong way to do things. And it's like, okay, they might not be the warmest person, but there might be something within them that they need. And it's not to look at everybody of like, oh, they need my help, but just be kind, be a good human.
And especially if you care about someone, because usually what I found anyway, with this kind of abuse, it's like you don't really see how abused you are unless you're like out of it, or unless you have a broader perspective,
Mhm.
as you say, unless you have some healthy relationships around you. You don't even know that the relationships you already have had before are unhealthy, because you have no reference point, or you have no,
Absolutely.
like, yeah, you just don't know unless you're in it. Like, I've been in this kind of, let's say, a narcissistic thing, go in a relationship, right, where I felt like I was emotionally abused in some way, and maybe not like hardcore, but now, only after I got out of it, and after I stopped talking to this person and stopped just, any interactions, now I can be like, oh my God, I was so manipulated. I was like cut off from my
Yeah.
friends and family. It was made wrong for me to contact them, and like, because, and it was all wrapped up in like spiritual stuff as well. So it was even more hardcore. But I feel like, it's actually so hard for us to see that we are abused when we are in it, because it's like this person that is an abuser often makes us feel like this is the best possible scenario for us. For example, like, to cut off from your friends and family is the best for you because they are so bad, or they are blah blah blah, whatever the story is, right? So then abuser makes us feel like
Yeah.
it's actually the best thing ever that they are doing for us when they treat us in the way they treat us. And that reminds me of a story of my spiritual mentor, Teal Swan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she was in a very abusive situation where she was like a part of satanic cult, and she was like tortured and raped and like all these things. She was actually the creator of a method, the completion process, that I use for my clients, where you go back to the traumatic event and you really experience the trauma and let out all the emotions that you felt in that moment. And so it's also like a trauma work. But she literally said that before she escaped her abuser, she didn't even know that what he was doing was wrong, and he was like doing all kinds of things, like drugging her, raping her, torturing her, closing her in somewhere for the night without food and water and light or anything, like just crazy stuff. And she didn't even comprehend that this is wrong, that it's not supposed to be like that. And only when she went for psychotherapy and started talking to people, she discovered, oh my God, it's actually like not as life's supposed to be or look like. And she spent,
No.
I think, from the year when she was 6 years old until she was 19 years old, she was like abused. So it has been her life, it has been so normal for her to be treated like that. So I feel like sometimes we need to really, as you say, not give up on our friends or whatever that cut off from us, because we might be as well this person that could be showing them how life is supposed to look like, and how the healthy relationship is supposed to look like, or they can reach out for help to us and talk about it and whatever. But oftentimes it just requires time to open up. And I didn't really know when I was in this kind of situation what's going on, unless I got out of it. So I can really relate. And of course it's great experience for me, because now I probably wouldn't be abused anymore, because I know how it feels, and I've been there, right? So
Absolutely.
I know this shit. I'm not
Yes.
gonna like get hooked on it anymore. And I know all
No.
these manipulation techniques that are used. So it's not gonna be I'm not scared of it anymore. But I know that there might be so many people that still need help, and they don't even know that they do. So let's just be open to them, and let's just help them somehow. And so if maybe someone listens to us and they are abused, what would be your advice to these kind of people when they are in the situation? They're like, oh my God, actually maybe I am abused right now.
I mean, definitely in the UK, there is a fantastic organisation, Women's Aid, and they have been brilliant with referrals, with signposting, where you can say, here, this is who you can speak to. But there is also in the UK as well, I think it's important to mention that actually up until 1891, the law here was that a man had the right to beat his wife. That was the law. So we have a lot of generational stuff that has been fed down through people. And it was only until 2005 that we had a Domestic Violence Act introduced properly. But it's only up until 2019 there was a Domestic Act that was coming in, because up until then we had if somebody was stalking, if somebody had beaten their wife, they didn't have an actual classified crime that they could charge them under. So it was trying to read between the law as to how to charge somebody with these crimes, which I think has instilled in a lot of people that maybe are in abusive situations that what's the point, because he didn't kill me, he didn't put me in hospital, so what's the police going to do? And so it got paused because of the pandemic, which is really sad, because domestic abuse referrals went up by 51% just during the first lockdown. And so now this Domestic Violence Act has come in as of last year, and through that Domestic Violence Act, actually police have the powers, which they're trialling at the moment, that if somebody has been in an abusive situation, they can immediately put an order on them. They don't need to go through court to stop the person contacting them. And there's also individual crimes now that people can be charged for. Stalking is a crime within its own right. So I do feel that things are slowly starting to change, but I think it's really important to understand that we as a society have so much work and so much further to come with this. But I think if somebody is being abused, definitely, if you're able to reach out, then do. If you're able to keep a diary, then do, because that will help you as well. But it's important that you're safe. And so I think your safety comes first. And for me, I would reach out to a charity. If you felt like you were in danger, yeah, for sure, phone the police. But I would reach out to I say women's aid. Men are abused too, but the majority of abused people tend to be women, sadly, from a male to a woman. But it's also important to understand that an abuser will present themselves as the nicest person that you've ever met. Some of the nicest people I've met have turned out to be the most abusive. And so just because they present well doesn't mean it's not possible of what you're being told about them. And abuse as well, it's not about harming the person. It's about control. It's about an abuser feeling empowered by themselves in a skewed way of thinking. It's not about them saying, well, I'll hurt you or I'll punish you. It's about them feeling that they're in control. It's their thought process that is wired wrongly. But yeah, the charities that we have, Citizens Advice that we have, there's all of these places that have access to refuges, to safe houses that are able to get you out of those situations if necessary. And then on the back of those, they can help you financially in needing to leave. Through Women's Aid, there's also the Rape Crisis Centre, which have been absolutely amazing. There's a Solace Centre in London, which has several offices. And the people that work in those have all been victims of sexual violence or domestic abuse themselves. And so it's not just textbook people that have read things and done degrees, that they're well informed, and being able to speak to somebody like that can make you relax so much because you feel heard for the first time. And so I would definitely reach out for help, would be my biggest bit of advice.
Yeah, and I feel like then you don't feel that alone with your abuse. I think that's the most important thing, to not feel that you're alone with it, because oftentimes, as we said, we are secluded when we are abused. So we feel like I'm the only person that can help myself, and I'm trapped, and I'm only with this person who is abusive, and I cannot do anything about it. So yeah, I feel like reaching out for help is such an important thing, and actually, like, yeah, just also checking. I feel like checking with yourself, like, am I actually fulfilled in all the relationships in my life? Are my needs being met? Am I heard in my relationships? Am I seen? Am I,
Absolutely.
all these questions that we can ask ourselves, like, do I feel comfortable in my relationships, or do I feel tense when I think of a person? Because then, like, all these signs can bring you to this awareness that, like, okay, there's something that
That's the realization.
needs to change. So what kind of questions would you say people should ask themselves to kind of like check with themselves, apart from what I mentioned?
Yeah, it's do I feel loved? Do I feel safe? Can I remember a time that I felt happy? What does it feel like now? And what feels good? What doesn't feel good? And when you say, are my needs being met? I think it's to delve into that a little bit more, as to not just your needs being met, but are you exhausted meeting their needs? Are you exhausted of living in an unpredictable situation? When you come home every day, do you know what situation you're walking into, or do you not know what's going to happen every single day? I think it's really important that when you start to analyze your day-to-day life, that you can see how different or how disconnected it is to maybe what you've been telling yourself that it is. And I think when you, like you say, when you do have that realization, and you it's almost like a light bulb moment to think like, oh no, that's not what it was. That's not how it's supposed to be. I think that's when you start to feel empowered to think, actually, this is not okay anymore. It needs to change. But it's hard. It's an act of bravery to speak out. Well, I mean, the women that have spoken out, that have given us the knowledge that we know now to be able to do the courses that we all do, it's an act of bravery. I think it's heroic.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, I was curious to ask you about this, because, like, sometimes we can see that someone is abused, but it's hard to communicate to them because they are so in their patterns and they don't see it so much that it just doesn't land. And so, what would you say to these people that are, okay, I can see that my best friend is being abused here, being controlled, being manipulated, or whatever, but they don't actually like see it themselves? So, how would you speak to this person? Or would you, like, as you say, would you build trust first? Do you have any specific, advice when you already know, okay, there is an abuse happening, but if I don't know how to say to this person because they don't see it or they don't listen or whatever. So how would you approach this?
I think the best thing that you can do is to hold, when I say hold space for somebody, it's don't give up on them. It's if I went up to somebody and said, oh, I can see that you're being abused, it's not a healthy situation, it's terrible, isn't it? Let's do something about it. They will become so defensive about their situation that the opportunity that I was going to have of being able to help them will be shut down straight away. So I think it's important that you just be a good friend to them, be open to whatever they say. They may sit there for many years and say things that have happened to them, but that rapport that you build up with them builds that trust. So when they do feel able to actually do something about it and to action it, you are a safe person for them to do that with. And I think that that is such a valuable asset to have as a friend, to have somebody that you fully trust, that already knows these things about you and has passed no judgment. Because I think if you feel judged when you're in that situation, it kind of induces shame within us. And shame is known and proven as a nothing feeling. If you feel shame, you can't actually generate that into something else. It's just something that sits within us that increases our low self-worth. And so if you have a friend that's just open and that doesn't pass judgment and is fully accepting, but you feel okay in their presence, I think it's maybe not so much, for somebody that's being abused as to how they reach out, but maybe as us in community of how we can support those that may need us. And actually, if we all supported everybody in that way, wouldn't we live in the most amazing community? We would have the kindest, most loving people around us all the time that were honest and authentic, that would actually minimize, I believe, people that were abusive, because they'd stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, absolutely. It would just be so visible. It would be like, whoa, there's something weird happening there, and everyone would know. It would be so
Yeah.
clear. Absolutely. And so if someone has suffered abuse and they just got out of it, I know that sometimes it's a big process of integration back to life. Like, for example, someone just got
Mhm.
out of the abusive relationship and then they are alone, they don't have anyone, they don't have friends, they don't have family because they just stopped talking to everyone. What would you say that they should do, how to go back to life in a way after? Because I'm
Mhm.
thinking of one person specifically that I know, and she was like just on her own, completely just with nothing and no one and no money, no friends, no family, and she had to like rebuild her life from scratch. So what would you say to this kind of person who is like after the abuse but they're still suffering the effects of the abuse
Yeah,
itself?
I mean, it's very, very common for somebody that has been able to leave an abusive relationship to suffer huge complex PTSD. There's so much to process of the unraveling as such. I describe trauma very much as a sense of grief. It's a loss of the person that you were and a loss of the life that you had. And I think there's also, let's normalize that if you have left an abusive relationship, you may miss that person that abused you, because to you that was love. And so there's a real big thought process that you have to go through to be able to unravel from that. And so if you have the space to be able to just grieve for a bit, I think that's a beautiful space that you could be in. But then I also think that coming out of it, yes, there's practical things of financial and housing and things like that. And I think be kind to yourself every single day. Give yourself an act of kindness that nobody else can give to you, because those acts of kindness that you do will fill your cup up so much that you will realize that actually future relationships, if you ever have them again, I know everybody's like, oh, I never want to date again. Never date for the first year coming out of an abusive relationship. Give yourself time to heal. Give yourself an act of kindness every single day, whether that's just having an extra 5 minutes in bed, sitting in a bath, not to wash or anything, but just because it feels good to immerse yourself in that water, to listen to a song that makes you feel great and happy, something uplifting. Do these, get outside. I can express that enough. But by doing these small acts of kindness to yourself each day, you are bit by bit telling yourself that you are worthy of the love that you didn't have. And I think that's quite a healing process to be able to do.
That's so
And
beautiful.
talk about it.
Yeah, I feel like developing this self love again, just connecting to yourself, connecting to your soul, to what you love to do, to how you feel good about yourself. Maybe you can start a gratitude journal as well to just like uplift your vibration, because I feel like
Sure.
oftentimes you are so low in after abuse, that you are in such a low vibrational state, that anything that can raise your vibration, really, whether it's movement, whether it's dancing, singing, yoga, meditation. Of course, sometimes it's hard to go straight there, because it's like you need to maybe first, as you say, grieve and go through a lot of layers of emotions. But anything that will raise your vibration and make you feel better about yourself and about your life, I feel like that could help
Mhm.
also as a recovery process. And also I feel like be gentle with yourself when it comes to the time that it takes, because I feel like people sometimes want to rush healing, and they feel like, okay, I should be back to life or whatever, I should go back to work, or put my I don't know, get my shit together or whatever, right? But actually, if you're
Absolutely.
extremely abused, you need time to process things, and that's completely okay. And
Mm.
so you can just be in, maybe for a month or two, you might not work, or you might not do anything, just taking care of yourself. I feel like it's very important to take this time for yourself. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's important to mention as well the Domestic Abuse Act that I mentioned that has just come in. As part of that new act that has come in, if somebody has left an abusive relationship and they have reached out to a charity or police or something like that, you actually are entitled now to 4 weeks paid off of work whilst you go through the process of leaving, which I don't think is publicised anywhere near enough. So I know that people that I've supported have been like, and that's why I say it mirrors grief, is that your world has stopped, essentially. You're in this deep sense of like, oh, it's a hard stop from where your life was, but the world around you doesn't stop. And that's really hard, I think, when you're grieving, because it's a reiteration that you should be better than what you are. And it's not. You're only going to be better at your own pace and be, like you say, being gentle to yourself. And I think, yeah, for a month or two, that's coming through the shock process of it. But I think the triggers and the trauma that's induced from domestic abuse can really last for quite some time, and there's no right or wrong length of time for that. You know, some people in 6 months might feel so relieved and so happy and so revitalized at this new life that they've got, that they're amazing, and some people 2 years down the line may still feel completely traumatized by what they went through. And everybody has their own rate of recovery, and that's okay, but each day is another opportunity to heal yourself. And I think that's the best way that you can look at it. And a gratitude journal is a great idea in terms of, at the end of each day, just write down one thing that you did, that you achieved for yourself that day. And it doesn't have to be anything big. If you managed to go to the shop and get some milk, hey, that's a win in my book, because you weren't allowed to do it before.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Just find little things that now you can do with freedom, right? That you, the freedom that you didn't have before. So that's a beautiful thing to do. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. So I have one last little question to you. Where could people find you if they feel like maybe they suffer domestic abuse and they want to talk to an expert or see your content, or maybe they know someone who might need your help? So what's the best way to contact you?
So Instagram is my main form on there. I'm on Hannah Garland 6292, and I'm always available to speak to people. Anybody that is suffering domestic abuse and you feel like I'm your avenue to be able to help, please do reach out. I have so much time and so much space for anybody in that situation, and I will always hold space for you.
That's so sweet of you. I can really feel that you're speaking from your heart. I can really feel that you just want to help people, and this is really, really beautiful to feel. Thank you so, so much for sharing your amazing energy and everything that you know. I feel like it was really helpful for everyone who maybe struggles with abuse. And yeah, it was certainly very, very knowledgeable. And so thank you so much for agreeing to speak on this
Oh, thank
podcast.
you for having me.